many of you have listened to the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast? I can't tell you that reaction, how much that means to us.
Welcome back to the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Brennan. Join us as we wrestle with what it takes to transform ourselves and the businesses we lead.
Yeah, you're kind of lame. If you don't have a strategy for maximizing your Google reviews and you haven't talked to Liftify yet, I mean, well, what are you waiting for? Man. Come on, seriously.
Hey, bro, thanks for joining us, man. We're really psyched to be able to hang out with you a bit today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Shirts look great.
Yeah, we went full on.
See, you just got to flex
you know?
in there, man.
Sorry, I did kind of. Yeah. Hey, I do like the sleeves on these. By the way, my friend, those are cut in the right way.
They're not loose. Yeah. I put it on. I'm like, you know what? I kind of like this shirt. I think I'm going to wear this to the gym later on today.
Yeah. It's good. Good motivation to stay trim. You know,
yeah,
if you're not, the shirts will call it out.
Yeah, keep bulking the arms, otherwise they don't fit the way you want it. So.
That's exactly right. So I'm actually, my mind is escaping me. Is this number 2 or number 3 for you on Head, Heart, and Boots? Have we had you on this is the second time. Okay.
I think it's the second time. Yeah, we did a Friday live one too. But
that's right.
Second time on Head, Heart, and Boots.
Yeah, right on. It just feels like we've been in this nonstop conversation the last 6 months or so. So you know where I wanted to start? I mean, we've had a chance to get to know you a little bit better, you know, because we have a lot of offline, we have a lot of clients who use Liftify and so forth. But I thought it might be kind of fun to start this episode with just a little more of a meet and greet of the founder and CEO of Liftify. You know, you've accomplished quite a lot in a very short period of time. I mean, I think even since our first conversation with you, the business has grown a lot. And I think what's really relatable is we have a lot of people in the audience that are 20 and 30 something restoration company owners. And I think it'd be interesting maybe just for you to share a little bit about your trajectory, if you're comfortable with that. Like, first of all, like, is entrepreneurship a natural instinct for you? Like, did you grow up around it? You know, family, uncles, parents, whatever. I'm kind of curious about your origin story a little bit. And I don't recall if we've ever brought that up before.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we've talked about it before. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Last Friday I had my 5-year-old son in the office with me because my wife was out of town. So I brought him in and he sat in here all day with me. And it reminded me of when I was growing up, my dad owned just a little local computer store, kind of before the days of Best Buy, where you would actually go in, buy a computer from a local business. And I used to go in when I was 5. You know, I was his age. I'd play with all the screws and stuff. And it just reminded me of that. And that's how I kind of grew up. My dad owned a local business. You know, those markets changed. Like, it was not all high growth and up and to the right. Like, there were some really hard times and a lot of pivoting. And I saw that as a kid. You know, I experienced the stress, you know, that families go through when you're running a local business, and even if things are changing around you, you know. And but yeah, I grew up. My dad always ran his own small business. Some years better than others. You know, there wasn't a crazy exit or anything, but it was enough to, you know, provide and get through it. And I always had a little bit of the itch. I spent 7 years in the corporate world working for a Fortune 1000 company, kind of working my way up marketing. And I think part of my success in that world was I did have the entrepreneurial itch and kind of we're going to do it mentality. Yeah, I was young. And so maybe a little bit overconfident, but my mentality was always, hey, I've only got one life. We're going to go for it and make a real difference. And, you know, in a 200-year-old cable company, that was not, you know, common necessarily, but created a lot of opportunity for me to kind of stand out, you know, and go do stuff. And so that's always been my mentality, is like, let's go do big stuff. You only got one shot. Like, let's help a lot of people. Let's do really cool stuff. You know, if you're not excited to get up every day and go do it, like, why are you doing it? You know, to go do something else. So I don't know where that comes from necessarily, but always had kind of the entrepreneurial itch. And I think related to, you know, I might get into this a little bit, but I think related to a lot of our customers and our growth, like, I really care about our customers. And I know, like, every company says that, but a lot of, you know, in our space in the tech world, a lot of companies are large VC-backed firms that they're just looking for an exit, right? I think part of what, you know, with a lot of your customers, like, we monitor the data. And, like, if we're not seeing the results, like, we'll pivot, because, like, I actually care about the small businesses and the people there. I think partly because that's how I grew up. You know, like, I grew up in one of those families. And so when we, you know, meet the business owners we work with and the leaders and the teams, like, it means something to me. When we made a difference in their business, like it matters. And so we really press upon the team on that. Every week we read all of our 5-star reviews from customers as a team, that week, and we go through them and we celebrate those. And, I want to build the culture as we grow the team to really, understand that and say, hey, like at the end of the day, if we're not actually helping real businesses and real families and real teams and people, like, that's why we're here, so we're going to do that. So I think a lot of that stems from being 5 years old and playing with screws in my dad's little computer store.
That's pretty cool. Was he real like communicated a lot in terms of what he was making decisions on and stuff like that? Or was it more just seeing it, being exposed to it happening around you?
Yeah, I mean, probably like every kid that runs, grows up in a small business, you get pulled into it. You're like, free helping out with little stuff. But I think as I got older, he got more into the digital stuff and design and website design and stuff. And I certainly gave input, on some of that. And that kind of got my interest in some of the marketing stuff. So I think even heading into college or my professional career, like I'd already built websites. I'd already done, a lot of digital stuff that a lot of people, didn't understand. I could code, a little bit. I'm certainly not a computer engineer, but I can get my way around it. And so I think some of that, I did, but more on the technical side, probably than the business side.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
You have a young family and you started a serious, like scaled, nationwide business. Are you guys in Canada? I forget. Are you guys serving Canada yet?
Yeah, absolutely. We have tons in Canada. We got our first one in New Zealand a couple of months ago. So that was exciting. So yeah, all across North America and then New Zealand.
Wow.
That's cool. Yeah. I bet you were in a hurry to go see them live and just make sure everything's in quote working okay, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to justify the ROI, there, but my finance guy's telling me it doesn't make sense yet, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, eventually. How do you manage yourself? I mean, because like both of us are married and I'm 21 years married, 3 kids now, teenagers. And I look back on my first couple businesses and there was so much opportunity cost at the time, just the way I managed my own self, my headspace and stuff. When I was really pouring into the business, my family was kind of suffering. My family connections were suffering a bit. And then I'd sometimes over index on the family thing. And then I felt like I wasn't doing enough in my business. Like how do you manage that, man? I mean, you've got a team, you have this international company now. Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis for you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's certainly not perfect. I could probably learn from you, Chris, on it. Get a few tips on how to do it well. I think it's been a journey. I think probably a lot of people listening to this face, like right at the beginning, when you're just getting off the ground or you just take something over, whatever, it's really hard. And you've got to kind of look at everything's in seasons, or at least that's how we looked at it. And, I told my wife, said, hey, like for this next season, like I've got to get it, off the ground. Right. And then we'll stabilize it a little bit. And there's got to be sacrifice though. I think there is. Like you can't do it all. I hate that social media lie, that you can just be great at everything all the time, it's going to be perfect. Like that's not how life is, but you've got to be on the same, page, in looking at the same long-term goals, as your spouse. So I think for a season, there was like, I started this while I still had a corporate job and we kind of built it up until I could jump. And there was, working the day job and then pulling all-nighters, and we had a 2-year-old, my wife was pregnant with another one. And, it was rough, it was a rough year, in a lot of ways. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. But I think one of the ways that I've helped manage it is like having a lot of conversations, even with my wife, and just saying, hey, like, here's where we want to go. Like I want to build something and I want to give this, to our family. I want to be able to do these things, for us. And if we're going to get there, like we can't just get a normal 9-to-5 job, and just do that. And so I think like her buying into that vision and kind of seeing, hey, you're not just really abandoning us, forever. This isn't an idol that's more important to us, but this is a season where you got to go get this thing off the ground, I think was helpful. So just like setting some perspective, and just setting the expectations, probably not that different than, when you arrive on the job site with the customer, just saying, hey, like, here's what we're looking at, if we're going to do this, and doing that. But I think that's kind of big picture and broad. And then I think you do have to pull it back. You do have to have the season we're kind of in now, where we do have a team and I coach T-ball, this spring, and I tried to be the assistant coach, and then no head coach was assigned. So I became the head coach, which was good. I'm glad that happened. But you kind of have to just get back into it and say, hey, like, I'm going to commit to this now. I couldn't have done this 2 years ago, but I can do it now because we've got a little bit of stability. Because I think you can always, run the risk too of saying there's always more to chase. So you can never get out of that loop, as well. And so you have to pull back, initially. I think very practically, like, we've implemented something called EOS in our business, or the entrepreneurial operating system. The book Traction, if anybody, many people have probably read that and seen that. Tons of our small business owners utilize that framework for how to run your business. That has been transformational for us as far as focusing on what's important, doing it. For anybody that hasn't, read that book and given it a shot, highly recommend it. This is, my team will laugh at me when I share this. We've implemented it personally, like with our family too. Like, I have a family EOS pulse meeting, and we do stuff on just where are we going and what do we want to do. And I know that's super nerdy, but it's been helpful, to kind of organize things and keep things on track. So I think having, an operating system, also having a vision, of the long term, and then just also, asking for grace from the people around you, when you don't show up or when you're mentally not there. I think just, candidly, what I struggle with the most is not even just being there physically and present. Like, our job's pretty remote, so that's easy, for me to be home, at night and stuff. But I think mentally, and you've had a rough day, or you're stressed about a bid, or you've got a big project you're working on, like, how do you stay in the moment, with the kids and with your family? I'm still working on that. I'm certainly haven't figured that completely out, but I think that's kind of my battle currently.
Dude, can you talk about that family EOS meeting? Because it's really funny.
Yeah.
I was literally just talking with my wife about something like that, because about 3 or 4 months ago, one of my buddies who's a serial entrepreneur, he talked about how he and his wife have a CEO meeting every Sunday evening. And he was describing that to me, and I'm like, man, that sounds awesome. Because the other thing I've been thinking about is keeping short accounts. Just this idea of we can allow things to stack up, not just with our loved ones, but our employees and stuff, where we observe something that's not quite in line, or something that bothers us, and we hang on to it until a month later, 3 months later, something comes to a head, and it's like you've been carrying this thing. It's like this idea of keeping short accounts. Like, what does that EOS pulse meeting sound like with you and your wife?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the kids too, do you involve the kids in that as well?
We don't, no, not the kids. That would be distracting. I mean, they're 5, 2, and 9 months. So
Okay,
there would be no productivity if they were,
you don't have a lot of practical input. Okay. All right.
Yeah, there's no practical input. So I think the EOS framework is to really build a 3-year vision, a 1-year vision, and then quarterly, metrics that you need to hit that 1-year vision. And then weekly you meet about it to talk about the quarter. In your business, that's how EOS kind of the structure. So, and we do this in the business too. It's a weekly kind of meeting pulse. But you're just kind of looking at your kind of chart for the quarter of, hey, these are the things we said we wanted to do. And in the business, it's much more like, these are the numbers we're trying to hit. On the family side, it's more like, hey, what do we want to be in 3 years? How many kids do you want to have? Where do you want to live? What do you want to invest in? Other things. What are vacations we want to do? Philanthropic things we want to do. And so you kind of break that down to this year. So we've just set some things that we wanted to accomplish this year, things we wanted to do. And then on a weekly level, part of it is just the logistics, so we've kind of broken out in EOS, you do different departments, so marriage is one, like our anniversary's on Sunday, so we talk about it, kind of heading into it, which is helpful for me. So I remember, kind of plan, but what do you want to do? Do you want to go on a trip? Do you want to stay? Do you want to have the kids? Do you not, just kind of talking about that before it just comes up. For us, like parenting kids is another bucket for us. So that's everything from, hey, what's the T-ball schedule to, hey, we want to go, we took the kids to the Great Wolf Lodge last month. Like, that's something my wife wanted to do, that we just kind of talked about, saying, hey, what do we want to do, with the kids, to more of some of the household stuff, be another department for us, spiritual, financial, so just kind of the major components of your life. We just kind of run through it. And it's just kind of open items. A lot of it's stuff that's just normal, in day-to-day life. But if you take, so what we do is we do lunch on Mondays is kind of our thing. So my mom watches our kids on Monday. And so my wife comes over here, we just go to lunch, and that's kind of become a routine. So she likes lunch. We don't call it a meeting because she doesn't like calling it a meeting. So we just call it lunch. But we'll go over it and just kind of talk through stuff. And I think it's helpful for me, even running the business, to say, man, I'm not like forgetting all these things at home that are important to me. It's like, hey, we've talked about them. These are things I need to do. It's not like super rigid, but it's more just opens up an intentional time to just talk about life. Like, what are we doing? And especially in our stage, probably in any stage, but with like young kids, it's like in the evenings, we don't talk a lot about life. It's just like chasing people around, making sure, nobody hurts themselves.
So it sounds like there's probably, or safe to assume, right, that there was some differences between you and your wife's personality, natural wiring. Like, how different are you? So, because sometimes when we meet entrepreneurs and business owners, it's like almost two peas in a pod. Like, they're still two different, people, but they both like this entrepreneurial thing. They're
Most of the
both
time, not
integrated.
though.
Yeah, most of the time not, but sometimes, and we're just like, wow, that's insane. That is not either one of our marriages by any stretch of the imagination. But what does that look like for you? And then if there is some pretty big differences, how do I say this? How do you keep your wife motivated to participate in that kind of stuff like that you're talking about? Because it is pretty damn nerdy, if we're honest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is. So we're polar opposites. So she's a nurse by trade.
My wife's a nurse.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she did surgery, so brain and
My wife
spine
did
primarily.
surgery too. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Bring them next time we get together. They'll have plenty to talk about.
Yeah,
so
yeah, man.
By like the trade, she stays home with our kids right now, but by the trade, you go in, you're told what to do, you do a great job, you leave at the end of the day. That's what she likes. The idea of entrepreneurship, she doesn't want anything to do with our business. Now, of course, I talk about it. She'll give me input because I ask her, but we're certainly not one of those couples. Like, we have, customers who it's a husband and wife team, or, spouses or whatever, and everybody's in it. That's certainly not, our world that we live in. So I think it's just kind of one is just Brandon doing it, saying, hey, like, this is important to me. I really want to do it. I think it's going to help our family, going forward, and kind of doing a lot of the work for it. Like, I pretty much do it, and kind of facilitate and then just get input, but it just really facilitates a dialogue, and I think the other side of it, like, we've seen value in it to where the buy-in's a lot easier now because it's like, oh, we're talking about stuff way earlier. We're not being rushed and trying to figure things out last minute on, simple things like boarding the dog, when we travel is like a friction point in our marriage. So like we're in, counseling here on this podcast, but, like the day before you leave, it's like, oh, neither of us, booked the dog, to board him, like silly stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you're just talking about it way earlier and you just say, hey, what do we need to do? Okay, we get it done. It just makes everything flow much better. So I think the buy-in's way easier now. And like, even people, like, she would tell you she's not a goal-oriented person at all, like doesn't like that stuff, doesn't like to see it, but like I think she values that I do. And now that we're kind of into it, I think everybody wants to be intentional with their life. They want to accomplish things, right? I think some people are just more wired to set goals and go chase them, more entrepreneurial, minded than others. So I think you just kind of have to lead it and just, accept it. And people are just different, it's not right or wrong. But I wouldn't, it's been great for our life. So if you guys are talking about it, Chris, I'd do it. This is not where I thought this would go, but there you go. There's a nugget from my personal life.
No, it's inspiring, man. It's like, who doesn't want a better marriage, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, who doesn't want their marriage and their relationships to function better? And I think it is hard for entrepreneurs because we got so many plans, we got so many ideas and plans that we're always stirring around. And I think sometimes I forget to let my wife in on it, and also to get into my wife's world, right? Like I can get so tied up in my world that me, getting outside of myself to really be curious about my wife's world that's not entrepreneurial, is hard for me sometimes. It's easy to just Netflix and chill or like get the kids to bed, right? It's like you can get into a pattern where it's just like, okay, I shut down my day, we collaborate with the kids, and then without fighting. It's not like you have a bad, you know what I mean? It's like it's not intentional. So I love that rhythm. That's cool.
I think the reality is based on the true definition of Netflix and chill. Most of us would be really happy if that was happening on a consistent basis. But let's not state
take it in the most literal sense. Most of the time.
Well, I think too, it's like, it does sound nerdy, like on a personal level, to be like, man, you like plan stuff and you set goals and stuff. But it's like if you talk to somebody who's running a business and they said, hey, I have no goals, we have no processes, we have no structure to anything we're doing. We're just kind of showing up every day and seeing how it goes. You'd think, man, like you're not gonna accomplish a lot. You're not gonna get very far. Like you're not gonna do this thing super well where everybody on your team thrives. And so I think it is kind of silly in our culture that like people don't apply that personally and say, hey, like you should have some structure around it. If this matters to you, like you should do it, figure out how to like run it well, because you only get one life, and the relationships and everything run well. So I
for the
think
record, I don't think it's nerdy at all, dude.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
cool.
nerdy. To me, it's wisdom. And coming from somebody who's younger than Brandon and I'm just like, yeah, all right, that's motivational to me, man. So I appreciate you sharing that.
No,
It's
I
cool.
love it, and I think it's important too, because what I know in our house, what I struggle with is that I can make the mistake, and I've done this a lot over my career, of not being intentional there, like being assumptive, really looking at it as, like you were talking about, things like as simple as the dog. That I relate to that. Like,
Oh, totally.
Jan and I are getting ready to head out this weekend for a friend's, their kids getting married. Well, what's been the kind of the biggest angst is, what the heck are we going to do with our 75-pound wolf? Like he doesn't just go to the neighbors, you know what I mean? And it's like, so I think it's this, I often slip into this place where I'm giving so much intentionality, so much planning, so much strategic development to the business. And I can just slide into this expectation that as soon as 6-7 o'clock hits and I turn that switch off for a little while in the evening, that I have no more responsibility. And now my kids are older, so it's easier for me to go into that mode because my kids are 21, 23. They're not at home. And what a disservice to one of the most valuable relationships to me, right? Which is my wife. Like our partnership, really, I can't get up and do this shit if I didn't have her in my corner. But often I'm not leading that way. There's not a lot of strategy being deployed in our home, our home world. So I think this is valuable. And I think the reality of it is that even key leaders, you don't even have to own the business. I did this as a GM. I still was just bleeding everything out for my employees, for my people, my market, my, those target clients. And I just would not bring any of that commitment home. I think it happens probably more than it's not, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I admire what you're doing, man. I think it's really
cool.
brilliant, actually.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, yeah, dude, we were planning to talk about AI and Google reviews and digital marketing and
let me throw one more thing out that I think is super important, that I see a lot of businesses struggle with, as far as like, how do I manage, how do we have vision? I think I've been really intentional and just trying to surround myself with people that are older and wiser than me. Like we have an advisory board. I'm in some roundtable groups with, one faith-based group and another one that's just other people that have done this. And I think it helps on the business side and giving you kind of a plan, helping you see clarity, just have those people. But I think it's also helped on the personal side too, of people like, hey, don't lose what's actually important, to chase what's not. It helps kind of recenter you. And I think a lot of business owners are like really lonely, in leaders, and they just don't have a lot of people around them. And, even if you don't feel like you have time, like I just encourage people to, you've got to get people around you, that are like you, that understand, kind of what you're going through and can just speak into your life. Cause like, I'm 31, like I don't know hardly anything, but like I can ask people that do, and I can avoid a lot of those mistakes, by learning and relying on them. And I just want to throw that in because I see that a lot. Like business owners, I feel like they're just really isolated, in their world. And like, you've got to get community around you, to get to where you want to go.
With that, I think a lot of times business owners, they may see the value in that, but the right groups, like I'm actually great. I'm really happy you brought that up, because I'm going to wrestle with it with you for a little while. It can be costly. Like I think those groups, when you participate in the right ones, there's a significant investment, because the group that launched that, the leaders that are participating and emceeing those things, they know how to get the right people in the seat for that community to really be weight bearing, for it to be valuable. And it costs significant amount of money. And then there's time commitment. How do you in the early phases of developing your business, how do you know to prioritize that? Like, is it just a gut instinct? And so you commit, and once you're committed, you're in. Like, what drove your commitment to the group, to spending that money for yourself, really? Right.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different, groups and stuff. Like what we faced is a lot of the groups like, YPO or, other types of things like we weren't even qualified for because you have to hit certain revenue targets. You have to be on growth trajectories. Like, we're not even there, to participate in those. And those are very like business focused, ones. I think that where I kind of started was when, and this is kind of how we started the business, but, customers, people that I ran into just said, hey, like, I got this idea, it's working. Like, would you grab coffee with me? Like really like one-on-one, people that I was like a second connection to in like LinkedIn terms, people. And I think people are oftentimes willing to help, so a lot of it's just that like individually, kind of just asking people for input or coffee or, a Zoom or whatever, and just getting some input and building those relationships. And then, it can also be different kinds of groups, that you do get involved in more formally, just, business ownership or leadership. And I think there's different flavors. Like, I think like one that I participated in is more of a faith-based and whole person one. Like, hey, like you as it's all business owners, but it's like, hey, you as a person, and it's not that costly, but it's also not sitting there sharing leads, and figuring out like looking at your metrics and stuff,
Right.
and doing that. So I think it's just as you look for it, it's like, what do you want, or feel like you need out of a group, and also just seeking out people individually, and saying, hey, like we had some technology questions on kind of where we're going, and like I just met with a couple of people who are CTOs that really scale businesses, that just did coffee and like cost me $4, for their coffee, but they gave me a lot of input, and it's not a lot of time for them, and it's not something we're going to do every week, or whatever. So I think like just continually learning and just seeking and being humble and saying, hey, like I'm trying to do this. Like, would you help me? I've got a couple of questions, and a lot of times people will say yes.
I think the key part that you're just seeking, you're asking,
Yeah.
you're proactively the one reaching out and trying to get those kinds of conversations initiated, which is a good reminder for me.
Well, and the same thing that is coming to my mind too is I think you have to be willing to engage in the right conversations with people. It's like I think of a lot of our friends, and it just makes me kind of inspires me to think, yeah, they are probably just as challenged, lonely at times, sort of like isolated in their own business development as we are, as business owners. And I think a lot of times we forget to go to that level with folks. It just ends up being sort of business networking chatter that we engage in. And just being, like you say, maybe it isn't always about, joining some really exclusive group, but it's deciding to take those existing relationships to a little bit different level where we engage about those things, the higher level things. That's cool, dude. Well,
let's get in.
Should we make the turn here?
Yeah, we better. I got another list of things that
we got into the head and the heart a little bit. Now we can get into some boots conversation. Love it.
Well, maybe we'll drag you back into a conversation and keep diving into some of this personal development stuff. Because
it's good.
And dude, and the reality of it is, and not everyone's getting a clear picture of this yet, but they certainly will as you guys continue to dominate in our industry. You are moving. And I think when we hear younger men and women talk about the things that they're using to develop themselves, their businesses, the level of impact that they're having, all of us should pause and listen. It doesn't matter if you're 60 years old and you've been running a resto company for 20 years. The game's not over, right? You might be in the third inning, but we got lots to do still. And so I think it's just a great reminder when we watch people. I think we can get caught up in the branding and the different things, which are all like, those are viable business decisions and actions we all have to take. We don't need to make it what it's not, but the real power in a guy like you is what you're doing personally to set the stage to take advantage of the doors when they open. And that kind of stuff we just talked about in terms of the way you're managing your relationships and going through the seasons and being proactive and being aware and honest with yourself about when I can and can't do things. That's really the foundation, right? That you're building on. So we have to touch on that stuff because it's so mission critical. But all right, let's turn the corner. So in one of our offline chats with you, obviously you guys are incorporating some new AI tech into the system at Liftify. So we're going to talk about that. But more importantly, there's an opportunity for all of us to demystify this concept and begin identifying real, tangible, not kind of sci-fi ways that we can incorporate this into our business. And you seem like the perfect person for us to begin leveraging that conversation with. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. I think maybe a place to start, Zach, is what's got you hyped about it that's not hype? Like, what's the reality of AI that's got you excited that we can grasp onto, you know?
Yeah, well, it's not going to solve all your problems, or it's just going to fix everything. So that's the general theme, right? There's like, it's going to just fix everything and run my business, run my family for me. So to be perfect. I think what is exciting for us about it is just like efficiency. It's going to help people do the things that are probably not as high value add faster and better. Certainly we're seeing that in our platform. We'll talk about, some of those things. But I think for me, that's exciting, to sit down and write a job description, is just awful. It's especially my like visionary personality, right? Well, no, you don't have to, anymore. You can get 90% of the way there on some of those things. So I think for me, that's what, I'm excited about is, this technology allows you to just focus more on what's super important that you have to do to move forward. And then you can utilize tools to do some of that other stuff that, man, for me, just kind of weighs me down. It's just like the sludge that you have to go through, running a business. And so just identifying those different pieces, with AI, and how can it help you, with some of the efficiency stuff, I think is what I'm excited about. I think a lot of times people are, we get the question certainly of like, hey, is Google going away? Is everybody just going to, ask Chat GPT, what restoration company they should use in an area? And I said, well, I wouldn't bet against Google. They got their own AI and, they've got, 95% market share. So I wouldn't bet against them. But also, even if that happened, you got to understand that all AI is just going out to the internet, looking at data points, consolidating a lot of information and then delivering something of what it thinks is the best output, from all those data points. Right. So if it, as it relates to reviews and, we're getting this question a lot as people are like, are reviews going to matter as much? What's going to happen? I'm like, well, you only have one business. That's a big data point is all the people that have voted for you, what they said about their company. So you better keep doing that. You better do more of that, because now they're scanning more and more stuff when it relates to your company if people are searching that way. So I think all that to not get down the review rabbit hole, but I think people sometimes, think it's going to change too much, like that's kind of what Google is, right? Just goes out, grabs information, pulls it back, for you. It's just in a different form. And so I think, some of the hype is purely just hype, but I think what's not hype is it can drive true efficiencies, and help you do things better and faster that are maybe, not the highest value add things that, you should be spending your time on.
I think that's an interesting point is that I think we have kind of created something out of nothing to a certain extent that it literally is just a really intelligent search bot right now. That's kind of its primary purpose that it's serving is even in some of these software applications, essentially what it's doing is just fast at going and retrieving information, right? Yeah. So like we've used it in a couple different formats, and it would be the equivalent of my son doing a research paper and spending however many hours combing the internet for examples, paragraphs, blah, blah, blah. That's really what the tool's doing.
Well,
it's not thinking for you.
Yeah. And it seems like in order to really take advantage of the technology, you have to speak the language of the technology, which I think it's kind of embarrassing to say this because I sort of think I'm somewhat of a techie person, kind of, is that just like with Google, there's a certain syntax that Google uses for like really being a power user and searching for stuff on the internet. Like there's language to it that if you don't know that language, you're really only leveraging 50% of Google's capability, right? If you don't know some of these search commands and so forth in the way that you're phrasing questions on Google, and likewise, it's even more sophisticated with ChatGPT 4. Like if you don't know how to talk to ChatGPT, the output you're going to get is pretty rudimentary, Like you can't, like I did a job description and it was, like you say, maybe 80% there. But I think if I had known how to really prime Chat GPT, I probably could have gotten a lot better output from it. So how much does that play into it, man? I mean, have you found any resources that are great at teaching the language of these AI models? Like, how did you get up to speed on this? Because you're obviously now leveraging your company, but
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely still, getting up to speed and figuring out how to leverage it. I think a balance for us, I mean, probably just like, a restoration owner is like, how much should you try to be an expert at this, and being an expert at this versus just be great at your job and then utilize the tools that are out there to get you 80%. That's kind of the mode we've taken. Like, obviously we've integrated it and stuff, but that's not really understanding the back end. That's just more, how do you connect right to it, which is, straightforward. So I think for us, we've just said, hey, how can we get 80% more efficient, at some of those things? And let's keep running, with where we're going. I don't need to be the gone LinkedIn expert, on AI. That's not what we're selling. That's not what I'm doing. So I would say, we're mediocre probably at, our understanding of, how to use it, but I would say it's good enough, and I think like, I know I have friends, I'm sure you guys do too, who they get so far down the rabbit hole, right? That like their value extraction is not near their time investment, in it. So I just caution people on that it's not going to solve all your problems. So utilize it, but, stay focused on where you're going. What's the prize? What's that 3-year EOS target, that you're hitting on, and stay focused on that.
So one of the examples of us kind of incorporating it into our business, I'd like to share that really quick. And then I'm really interested, I think, to just kind of kick off maybe where we go down a rabbit hole of working through some examples of how teams could actually be using this. But I just would like to share an example, and then I want to dive into what Liftify is doing, because again, I think it's a perfect example of leveraging time for value by using the tool, but kind of a rudimentary way that our team used it. And I think this is important to note, the balance between the relationship component and then leveraging it, like you've said, to kind of do more of these mundane tasking. So our team, we have a small team. We're pretty much still in the startup phases for a lot of ways. And so our team did an exercise where we were working through establishing our core values. And our team's small enough right now that we want the folks that are part of the team right now to play a pretty integral role in that and contribute to it. So anyways, we did this exercise over a series of weeks, where as part of our team meeting, we were going through these core values. And first we did them as individuals, then we did the ones as we thought were relevant to the company, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, we settle on our 5, right? So then there's like this part that can really eat up a lot of time, of where now you've got to kind of create the definition of these core values, right? Like, what's the behaviors? What are they now for our business? And we literally plugged them into Chat GPT, and in 15, 20 seconds got, like you've said many times, like this 80% of what we wanted.
A really good, just quick editable outcome,
Yeah.
right? Versus we might have labored over that for a couple hours or something, right?
Maybe
like,
days,
yeah,
right? By the time you get distracted and do all the things. And it was like literally an instant. We had a really strong foundation to work from that we could just kind of tweak it and make it our own. And I think one of the things that we wrestled with potentially at the beginning is, did we devalue then those definitions because we didn't go through the labor of writing it, that we allowed Chat GPT, right? And the reality of it is it was just articulated much cleaner than we probably would have on our own anyways.
Yeah. And the question is I think over time anyway, with values and a lot of this other stuff that we might use it for, right? We create the value as we go.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to be redefining what those values mean to us over time.
Yeah. How do you integrate?
But to be able to just have that accomplished and then move on to the next important thing is so cool. So how have you guys identified its benefit within Liftify? Like, what's the application there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I get that too. Of like, is it inauthentic for us to use this? And what that comes down to is just pride, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, like I could have wrote it. It just came back in 20 seconds. 80% of what I could have done. So just embrace it and just use it.
My thoughts are better than the rest of the universe's thoughts.
Yeah, no one has ever thought about values before. Like we're gonna think about them in this hour as we sit here. So,
yes.
So I think for us, a few different ways. I mentioned job descriptions. For us, super taxing to do. We found help doing that. Idea generation. So if you're thinking through a problem, like, what are the 10 steps to do mitigation or something. You're looking at putting, something together, and maybe, it spits back a bunch of stuff and two of them are terrible ideas, right? But it gets you a lot of the way there. I think we've been putting in some just random ideas, things that we're trying to think through, and it's pretty good at giving you some buckets to think about, even if it's not totally accurate. What it's saying just helps with the thought process as you're thinking through different challenges, with your team or, whatever. So that can be interesting. Social posts, take forever, to write well. So we're using it for all of our social media posts. Again, we're not just using it right away. We're taking the 80% and then editing it, so it's still real. But we'll do a lot of, facts, different things about reviews, why they matter, how they help your business, and then plug that in and have it spit out a little summary, of it that's just easy to share on social. So that's an efficiency thing for us. And then long form like marketing, materials like blog posts, press releases for us. We have new partnerships and stuff we're launching. Just plug that in. You've got a pretty quick 500 words, you can edit and get out there. So all those things are really helpful. At our stage, we don't have like a content team, or a copywriter, to write a lot of that content. So those are some of the ways for us that we're actively using it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Those are really they're just user friendly and applicable. Sorry, I'm trying to see my iPad with my 40 something.
Oh, you didn't bring your
oh god, don't even get me started.
Your readers.
Gosh, I'm going quasi depressed right now, Zach. You got to help me through this, man. So okay, now there's a little bit more high speed way that Liftify is incorporating AI. We've had an opportunity to kind of see some of the insides of it before it even went live, but tell us about that, because that's got some legit return on investment, I think, for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most tangible, easy way that, this immediate release can help you in your business is the number one complaint that we get from customers when they start getting more reviews. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to respond to all these reviews? And after you do like 4, and I've done it, it's like, what else do I say? Like, I know I need to respond. I know it's good for SEO. I know it looks good publicly as well to respond. It's nice to thank people, but man, what do I say? And so what we've done in our platform is to put in basically a button on the reply where it can use AI and will generate a response for you that's completely custom. It'll pull in your business name, actually read their comments and try to spit something back. And again, it's the 80-20 rule, right? You might want to fine tune it a little bit before you post it. But if you're going to post 2 or 3 sentences to respond to every review from a customer, instead of that taking 5 minutes each, it takes about 15 seconds. And what we're seeing a lot of people are doing is owners are starting to offload that to their office teams, where they didn't want to give up that control, to an office manager or somebody, there at the front desk. But now it's like, okay, use this, tweak it a little bit and go ahead and push it live. So I think that's, live in our platform now. A lot of our customers, in the short bridge between when ChatGPT launched and we launched ours, we started hearing, hey, we're copying our reviews and putting them in, and then we're pasting it out, so we just put it in the dashboard, so they didn't have to do that. But that's a tangible way that, you can make responding to reviews easier for your business and doing it, in a really unique way, every time. I think that's where it is today. Where it's going is actually being able to read job attributes, so if we're connected to your CRM and we can see it's a water damage remediation or fire or whatever, having it read that and pull that into it as well. And to just be able to completely let it auto respond if you want. I think that's coming for us as well. Being able to just let it, say, hey, we're just going to let it always respond, and read some of those things. So I think it's still developing, which is kind of the exciting part too. Like, this is only phase 1, right? I think there will be a lot more development of it. But it's already really good. I mean, you read it, you're like, man, that's better than the response I could have come up with. I'm going to tweak a couple of these words and, we're going to hit send. So that's a tangible way in our dashboard, that we've implemented it. And we've gotten really great feedback from our customers.
Yeah, I think for some of those teams, I'm just even thinking about some of the teams we work with that you do. I mean, they're getting hundreds a year, hundreds of new reviews. And you're right. Like, that's a pretty substantial time commitment. I think the other thing I like about it, so one of the things that we talk a lot about with teams is, and this is a saying that we heard many, many moons ago by somebody, I could barely remember who it is, but they just had this saying of make it easier to do the right thing than the wrong thing. And I think things like what you're referring to, that gives us confidence as leaders to offset, to delegate, to put that in the hands of other people on our team. And it's never been, in most cases, malicious intent why we don't. It's not even necessarily because we're control freaks or all the many things that we get dubbed, right? But a lot of it is just, this is my baby. We started this business. This brand was built on my handshakes. And it's hard for us to hand off those relational components like that because we're nervous that it won't feel like it did, when we built the business. And I think these are great examples of ways that tech can be leveraged to get the same kind of communication or commitment outcome that we need, making it easier for our people to do, do the right thing, essentially.
Or better, right? Take it like a negative review experience is a good example. Like a lot of times the owner is the worst one to respond to that because they're going to come guns a-blazing. It's personal, right? You got to kind of talk them off the ledge. And the sentiment analysis with a lot of these tools, like if you respond to a 1-star review, the template it gives you helps get you 90% of the way there to how you can say it, how you want to say it tomorrow when you read it, not what you're feeling in the moment, but how you're going to want to respond to it if somebody reads that. And so I think it can be helpful for everybody, but it can certainly allow you to, kind of delegate that and do some of those things much, much better. I think the other piece is that's kind of at a very micro, like review by review level. The other side of it is the macro view. So take a business that you guys work with that's 10, 15 locations, running thousands of jobs a year, multiple states, whatever. It's a large business. The other part of what AI is going to allow us to do, and like we can do in our platform as well, is to begin to analyze the results in a macro trend. So identify sentiment. What are out of all the 4s and 5-star reviews that you got, what are people calling out? People, projects, what kinds of projects, what's going well in our business? And then on the other side, what's not going well? Is it always a technician? And being able to draw those insights and reading the reviews and reading all of that, where yes, you could have always exported it in Excel and gone one by one and started tagging things, right? But I think this AI is going to allow you to just decipher information way clearer and just suggest to you, hey, here's the things we're seeing out of hundreds of these data points that's going well. Here's what's not going well. And it can help businesses solve for problems, much faster than they could by just hiring an intern, going through 100,000 Excel rows. Those kinds of things I think are really exciting, around the technology. Just as an example, it applies to all data, but reviews is one where if you're a large company, work with a lot of like large HVAC companies, they may have 400 jobs a week, that they're doing. Like you need a macro view into how you're doing. You can't look at it one by one.
Yeah, that's huge. That's really intelligent. Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to what we were originally talking about actually before we got online, if that's all right, here as we kind of round out our time together. You've been innovating. So Liftify has been innovating in the restoration space specifically. And I think what really caught Brandon and I is we were hearing a much bigger story of a technology company that's really tuned in to their customer experience after the sale, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think in this industry, it's one of those, the software as a service, where it's like once people close that deal and you're paying X amount per month, with most companies, it's like you get what you get, and without naming names of other people in that Google review space, there's definitely that feel, and they work across multiple industry categories, and you kind of get what you get, and they're as good as they are. And with you opened up our conversation this morning with, hey, we've actually been adapting and figuring out some new things in the restoration space specifically, and we're seeing better results. Do you want to talk about that? I mean, this is your audience, man. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, restoration is its own beast. It's what we've learned over the last 18 months of working in the space. I think it goes back to this, first, Chris, like my background, why we started the business. Like, we don't want to just be a software company that just sells stuff. Like, we want to actually solve this problem and like care about the businesses and drive the results. And so part of our whole model is like, we analyze the results every Monday. We've got a board of people that aren't hitting the conversion rates we want from all the industries. Like, we review it. Why is this happening? What's going on? What are we going to do to change it? To get them, and then the other side, what are people that are getting 40% conversion rates? What are they doing? Like, we're learning and actively trying because we care, because we think this moves the needle in the business. So what I'd mentioned at the beginning of the call related to it was, hey, what we started noticing is like our restoration customers, when we were just doing kind of our standard flow for any business, where after the invoice is sent, if we automate it through like QuickBooks, is a common one with our restoration customers, we weren't hitting the conversion rates that we find acceptable, probably a lot better than what they were doing previously, but still not to like what I would consider, I'm proud of, and that I think their potential is. So we started getting on calls to them and figuring out, like, the question we always ask is like, what is that ideal moment to ask for a review? Just walk me through the process from jobs complete. You get the COS sheet. Tim, I'm learning some terminology in the industry. Where does that go? And what we heard from everybody in the restoration space is, when that customer gets that bill, but sometimes higher than they thought. Sometimes it's not clear what insurance is covering, or maybe they have a deductible they didn't know of. Like, that's actually not the best time. That could be the worst time if expectations weren't set well on the front end. And so, we kind of said, okay, well, before that is actually the best time. So like right when the job is done, when they move back into their home or whatever, the project's done, but typically that invoicing could take a week, or whatever afterwards. That's the moment we've got to get there. And so we've started talking about it. The challenge is a lot of times there's no automation capability at that moment. It all happens at the invoicing stage. So we figured out a process and a way to make it really easy for the team to get it to the customer right at that moment. And if you want to know how to do that, schedule a demo with us. I'll show you how we do it. But the goal was really, hey, we want optimal results and optimal timing. And so we've kind of changed our even onboarding with restoration customers to say, hey, look, your industry is kind of unique. We can automate everything on the back end and do it at the QuickBooks stage. But if you really want to do better than that, you're going to do it at the optimal time, and then probably even coach your team to do it a little bit in the field, but I wouldn't rely totally on that. But we're going to give you kind of 3 layers, essentially, of how you can do it. And you get to choose the level of effort you want to put in, and you can utilize the tools or not. But here's what you can expect, with these different pieces. And I think that's just a really different experience, for a company than just, hey, buy software, log in, figure it out. Good luck, which is kind of the space that we're in. And so we just don't feel like businesses need more of that. We think they need to solve the problem. And now we have, 100 restoration companies, running, utilizing this. We've got the data to say, hey, we know how to do it. If you have this problem and you're like every other restoration company, we can drive you reviews. Here's the path, for you to do it. It's almost like a playbook or recipe, for restoration. So we're still refining it. We'll keep refining it. But, we made some significant changes because we're just looking at it and saying, hey, this industry, something is different about it. Like, we need to get on the phone and figure this out.
That is true. I mean, I think the way that you highlighted that before you launched into that piece is really good. That is unique. And just as a reminder for folks that listen to the show, I think if you're watching right now, it's kind of humorous, right? We have like our CNR cup up. We've got our Liftify shirts on. This today was kind of over the top, but I think what's important to remind everybody is we are very particular in our relationships. It's not a fee. It's not a fee for relationship type of scenario. It's the groups that we put on our sponsor page, the folks that help us contribute to the show, keep the show going. They're teams like your team, Zach, where there's a commitment to service to the end user. Like, there's a purpose, there's a mission behind the business, and there's a willingness to take action to prove that. And I think in my mind, that's a great example, because in most cases, like what you've already highlighted, you're already getting good results, even without refining, even without iterating. They're already better than most other versions of anything somebody's going to use to get Google reviews. So the fact that you're still so dedicated to making sure the product meets and exceeds the expectation of the client is a real testament.
Yeah, a lot of these other companies, companies coming out of Silicon Valley and Austin and blah, blah, blah. It's like ARR, more ARR. Let's just get more revenue, and so I just think it's, and we get that. Like, that's what it is when you have a venture-backed company.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's just so much value in when you see someone where customer experience, there's clearly a really customer centric, like money will follow the success we create for our clients. I just love that, man. It's awesome. And it's so funny as you were talking about the numbers review that you guys do, like it sounds a whole hell of a lot like our production meetings that we run in the restoration industry, where we're looking at GPs of current jobs. We're looking at cost versus collected. How is this? We're keeping track of those metrics because they tune us into how could we be better on these individual jobs or clients or whatever, right? So
okay, I have a question for you. This is a little maybe potentially open Pandora's box a little bit, but so you have an interesting perspective of our businesses, right? So we're restoration contractors. We partner with Liftify, and Liftify essentially sees the difference between what we say we do and what our clients tell us we actually do, right? It's a pretty interesting perspective to hold. What, and not to put you on the spot, but what do you see as maybe the top 1 to 3 things that is a gap? It's an expectation gap where we're telling you, right, how great we are as a restoration contractor, but then you're seeing these differences, these gaps. What stands out?
Yeah, I'm sure you guys,
right?
I'm sure you guys follow negative reviews.
Yeah.
You know, what is that?
Yeah, man, let me give me a second to think about that.
We totally threw you on that one, like on the spot.
I mean, I'll tell you one thing that we've seen from businesses we work with who acquire new locations, and then they go and they try to get reviews from those businesses. That has been rough, you know, because they're acquiring typically a struggling business, right? And then sometimes I don't think they fully understood the true bad experiences, you know, that some of those customers have, or the brand reputation that they really have to invest and build, especially in your guys' world. You know, if you screw up somebody's, you know, house and their house isn't put back together, and, you know, like that is real, you know, like it really matters if you do it right and if you do it wrong. And so I think, you know, one of the things I've seen is people that are buying new markets, even if the numbers look okay, you know, on paper, when you go to buy it, maybe do some additional vetting and understand, like, how is this company been representing themselves in this market for this season? And like, do we have a huge brand problem that we're going to have to invest in, and should we invest in, you know, doing commercials, doing things that say, hey, we have a new ownership. We're going to run this different. We own this business over here. We have a 4.9 stars. We're going to serve this better. I think a lot of people are kind of caught off guard. They think, hey, it's good business. We'll run it. We'll start doing it. And they quickly realize, oh, it wasn't a very good business, you know, and there were some real problems, you know, that people have. So that's something that sticks out. I don't know if that exactly answers your question. I think the other thing that I've seen as well is, like, it all comes down to people, you know. So if you're getting some negative reviews, typically what we see is it kind of centers around the same individuals on your team, right? And so a lot of people, their initial reaction is, hey, let's just filter out how to block them from, let's just not stop asking their customers for reviews, versus, you know, when I'm in the conversation with the owner, the real question is, hey, like, how do you fix that problem on your team? Because these aren't fake, like these are real customer experiences. And there's a theme here, you know, with the business. And so I think that, like, we have worked with an HVAC company in Florida that just comes to mind. Huge business, 12 locations, thousands of jobs a month. And they have 95% of the reviews are positive, but because of the volume, they got significant bad reviews in the last month. You get 10 and you got 300 good reviews, but still 10. And their owner, you know, this week I talked to him and just said, hey, like, you know, I know you didn't have 10 before, you didn't have anything, you know. He's like, I love it because it points out the job we're doing when it's not good. And I'm going to bring it up in the team meeting. And you bet those people who their name's in that bad review, they're not going to do it again that next week. And if they do, they're not going to be here the next week. So it's fine. Just get us reviews. I'll fix the quality problems. And so I think that just that sentiment of, hey, so let's not focus on not getting bad reviews. Let's focus on providing great experiences, and then the positive reviews will flow. And let's actually fix the business. And I think people are just sometimes try to put a Band-Aid on it, you know, if that makes sense, versus actually getting to the root of it.
I think the reality of it is there's probably some hesitation regarding the consistency of reviews, because we are all a little gun shy to hear the truth. Like, I think there's a reality.
We are, but that Florida guy, that's pretty inspiring, man. I mean, that's great leadership. Example. It's like, that's that kind of boldness I think we all need. It's like, let's deal with what's in front of us and let's keep moving. Yeah. Let's keep moving. Let's not try to optimize for hiding. Like, I can't think of a single successful business we've worked with where they put any energy into hiding negativity and bad results.
Or skirting it, or working around it.
Maneuvering around. Yeah. So that's awesome, man. That's a really great
Yeah.
example.
And I'm looking at their numbers right now. Like they have 400 positive reviews this month and 40 negative reviews, so 10% are negative. But once they drill into it, a lot of it's around price, and like setting the expectation with the customer. And you can also control who you're asking. But his feedback was to go back to the managers and say, hey, when we're quoting a new HVAC furnace install, we need to be really clear, up front at what the price is, right? And he didn't know that, before. He probably thought they were doing fine with it. And so I've just loved his reaction to it, because it's not, hey, how do we exclude everybody who only spent a couple $100, with us and didn't end up doing the $10,000 install? His approach is, hey, let's keep asking everybody we go into their home with, and we're going to get better at those pieces so there are no surprises. And even if people think we're too expensive, they had such a great experience that they're going to leave a positive review. So the technician was really nice. We chose to go another direction. That's the standard he's setting internally with his team.
Dude, that's a huge, I'm hearing numbers that you're talking about. So they had 400 reviews in a single month. Yeah, they're moving some business through that system. Well, there's a testament to how has that been possible, because that leader clearly has been thinking about their business in a real legitimate strategic way. This is only probably one of many times they've been faced with some kind of truth and walk the high road. And that's why their business looks the way it does. So hats off to them, and a great example, I think, for us to contemplate as we continue to drive the reviews and do the things that we need to manage our digital presence. Okay, so we are always try to be really good with time commitments, because we know that the folks that we have on the show are super busy. So let's just remind everybody who you are and what you have, so that people know where to go. And then, dude, leave us with one nugget. Okay, one thing that in regard to our digital presence, in regards to reviews, regards to AI, that you feel like, hey, it's not rocket science, but this thing's important. Hold on to this, and then we'll wrap things up and get you out of here.
Yeah. Well, I'm Zach Garrett with Liftify, founder and CEO. So we help businesses build stronger reputations online. So if you want to have the strongest reputation, have the most reviews in your market, and be at the top of Google, we can help you do that. So that's what we do. As far as a nugget to leave, I'll just keep it centered around the AI and responding. Like, respond to your reviews. You have to. It's good for search. Customers care. Even if you generate reviews, if you don't respond to them, you're missing out on probably 30-40% of the value, of that review, even from a search perspective. So whether you're using AI or something, get reviews, but respond to them, and respond to everyone, and commit to that. Have somebody on your team own it and saying, hey, we're going to respond to every review, and even the good ones that are just 5 stars. We're going to respond and utilize that, because it's going to help us rank on Google.
Love it, dude. Yeah. Thanks again, man. We always love having you on the show. We appreciate you being willing to share your time. So
yeah, it's good. And I feel inspired. So one of the other things that you talked about earlier, as we got to know you a little bit, was just this idea of having a weekly EOS meeting with your wife. And I'm like, man, I've been thinking about that, talking about that for a long time. It's time to do. And some of you listening, I think, may want to take advantage of that as well, right? It's like, if you got a healthy business, but your home isn't healthy, right? Your marriage isn't healthy. How exactly are you winning at the end of the day, right? It's like we need healthy relationships around us in order to enjoy the fruits of our labor. So anyway, that was awesome. Liftify.com/floodlight. You're kind of lame if you don't have a strategy for maximizing your Google reviews and you haven't talked to Liftify yet. I mean, what are you waiting for? Man. Come on, seriously.
Get on the bus.
Good to see you again, man.
All right, gang.
Thanks for having me. See you guys. Bye.